This week, several sainthood causes move forward, economic reforms continue, and we look at the papal influence in the Holy Land. Hello and welcome to this edition of Vatican Connections. There's lots going on. We've got sainthood causes and economic reforms. But first, here's what's going on. Pope Francis has advanced the sainthood causes of 52 people. Among them are Jesuit Father John Sullivan, who was born into an Anglican family and entered the Catholic Church at the age of 35. The Pope also recognized the martyrdom of Archbishop Vincent Prenucciand and 37 companions. Now, 4 Spanish martyrs were also recognized, and they can now be beatified. The Pope signed a decree recognizing the heroic virtues of 8 other people, including a laywoman who was a member of the Prelature of Opus Dei and died at the age of 17. The Vatileaks trial continued this week with testimony from witnesses. First up, Stefano Fraleone, an accountant who used to work for the Prefecture for Economic Affairs of the Holy See, but he was suspended by Monsignor Lucio Vallejo Balda. Now, Fraleone testified that Francesca Sciauqui started appearing in the prefecture's office a couple of times a week before the Commission of Reference was created to study the Vatican's economic and administrative structures. She would take part in closed-door meetings that only Vallejo Balda and 2 others were in on. Now, the prefecture staff started noticing things amiss from there, like archived documents being photocopied, 4 valuable suitcases being delivered to the office only to be taken away, and Monsignor Vallejo Balda showed Fraleone documents from the Italian police about a case against a priest who was arrested for attempted money laundering. Now, Fraleone also testified that anyone in the office who asked questions would be accused of rowing against Pope Francis's reforms. And the trial continues. Speaking of reforms, one of the key areas under the microscope is Vatican finances and administration procedures. Now, back in December, the Council for the Economy appointed PricewaterhouseCoopers to conduct an external audit. And this week, we learned that contract has been suspended. Vatican spokesperson Father Federico Lombardi said the scope of certain clauses in the contract need to be clarified and the method of implementing those clauses. He emphasized this is not a sign of internal resistance to the audit, but necessary clarifications given the size of the task at hand. Turning to ecumenical relations, the 4th International Malines Conversation Group met outside Rome for 6 days. The Malines Conversation Group is an informal conversation group started in the 1920s. Catholic and Anglican prelates come together to have conversations about different topics that separate Catholics and Anglicans. Now, this time the conversation focused on ordination and how the understanding of ordination has evolved in the 2 churches. Vatican Radio's Philippa Hitchens spoke to Father Tony Kerr of the Pontifical Council for the Promotion of Christian Unity about this year's gathering.
Tell us first of all then a bit about the origins, the history of this Malines Conversation Group.
The Malines Group started just more than 20 years after the publication of Leo XIII's famous encyclical on Anglican orders, Apostolicae Curae, and it was founded by a group of English largely gentry and the Bishop of Malines, Cardinal Mercier, and it met because there seemed to be such a block on progress or on recognition of Anglican orders. It met with the approval of the Vatican and the authorities of the 2 archbishops of Canterbury and York to see what could be done, to see how things could be taken forward. So it was a theological investigation in the wake of what was seeming like an insuperable obstacle.
This was quite an audacious initiative, even if it did have Vatican approval, because we're 30 years or so before the Council and the opening towards ecumenism.
It is quite a remarkable development, particularly given the state positions of the Catholic Church with regard to ecumenism at that time. The Catholic Church was not involved in the new ecumenical endeavours that were beginning at the beginning of the 20th century, and really not until the Second Vatican Council. So yes, incredible, and I think it is tribute to the force of character of Cardinal Mercier, who drove it forward, and some of the very remarkable people who were involved in those first conversations.
So how would you compare that atmosphere of the 20s then with the current context in which you're meeting today?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. I think one of the things we have to say is that we, again, have things which look like insuperable obstacles, and when you're faced with things that you can't see a way around, you have to do a lot of exploration, and that's going to take time, and it needs to be done in an atmosphere of friendship and honesty and frankness to see where progress might be made. We know that the Lord wants us to be one. We know that we have to overcome our differences. We know that's a mandate and a demand that the gospel puts on us. So what we are responsible to do is to say, well, how is that going to happen? To open ourselves to one another and open ourselves in that to the Spirit and to His guidance in searching a way forward.
You mentioned the question of ordination, which was behind the original group meeting, and of course today that's further complicated by the ordination of women into the priesthood and now also episcopal ordinations. Is this still, in your view, or is it today the most serious obstacle that we're facing?
Yes, it probably is one of the most serious obstacles that we are confronted with at the moment, and it is difficult to see a way forward, and that is why we're having these conversations. One of the reasons we're having these conversations is to see where we might be able to progress in mutual understanding towards some kind of agreement.
World Youth Day is less than 100 days away. The local organizing committee in Krakow has this update.
Krakow is known for its historical architecture and classical churches, but amidst these old and traditional buildings emerges very impressive new ones, like the Małopolska Garden of Arts. In this place, Krakow's young, talented, and artistic abilities are created and presented here, and has won many prizes for its architecture in the past 4 years. Now let's get into this week's important topic. Many people have been asking us for instructions regarding visas to Poland. The Polish government is working hard to make it easier for all World Youth Day participants to obtain the entry visa into the Schengen area, which is the European zone that Poland is a part of. In countries where there are no Polish consulates, such as Ghana, Nepal, Bangladesh, and others, visas can be acquired in government offices of the Czech Republic, Netherlands, Switzerland, and Sweden. The required document to obtain visa is called Confirmation of Participation for World Youth Day in Krakow 2016 for participants applying for visas. This will be automatically generated through the registration system once you finish the registration process. You must print out the document and have it signed by a bishop or diocesan delegate, confirming the authenticity of the document. All detailed information can be found on the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs website or on the Info Pack section of our website. And that was this week's World Youth Day Minute. Continue praying for us, and we'll see you next week.
The Vatican's financial watchdog agency said the Vatican has spotted 3 times the number of questionable transactions in 2015 than in 2014. René Brulhart, the head of the Financial Intelligence Authority, told media this week that in 2015, his office suspended 8 transactions that were worth $9.3 million. They also froze 4 bank accounts. Brulhart said these numbers show that the new systems in place for flagging suspicious transactions and accounts are indeed working. And up next, we talked to Brother Peter Bray, the Vice Rector of Bethlehem University, about life in the Holy Land, the importance of education, and hope for the future. Thank you for making time for us. Now, a lot of our viewers are familiar with Bethlehem University because of the documentary Across the Divide that we did, but many may not be. So for those who are not, introduce us to the university.
Well, as you just mentioned, it was started in 1973, emerging out of the visit of Pope Paul VI in 1964. And it started with 112 students, a very tentative start, I'd say. And now we've grown to 3,200 students, and we have 5 faculties which grew up over those years in faculties of business, education, nursing, science and arts, and then we have an Institute of Hotel Management and Tourism. We are committed to serve the Palestinian people through education, and of all of the needs that the Palestinian people have, we have decided that education is the one that we will respond to. We're very conscious that there are many others, but our focus is on serving the Palestinian people through education, and that's what we are attempting to do. So our pupils or students are almost entirely Palestinian. Unfortunately, we are restricted in where they come from. About 40% come from East Jerusalem, so they come through the wall each day, and then from Hebron and Bethlehem and the surrounding area. Prior to the wall, we had students from the north of Jerusalem and from Hebron, but it's virtually impossible for them to get there now with the checkpoints that they have to face.
And it's open to Christians and Muslim students?
Well, we're serving the Palestinian people. Right. Okay, so the Palestinian people, it's a country where less than 2% of the population now are Christian. And for us, we have about 73% of the students are Muslims and 27% are Christians. Which in relation to the percentage of Christians in the country is a significant outreach to Christians for several reasons. One is to provide them with support, because what we're aiming for is around 30% of our students as Christians. It means that they're not isolated little Christians in a sea of Muslim students, which is a significant way of supporting them. But the reverse is that it's impossible for our Muslim students to be there and avoid Christians. So it's a way of bringing Christians and Muslims together, and quite a number of the students I've spoken to, Muslim students, particularly from Hebron, where there aren't any Christians, when they came to Bethlehem University, it was the first time they'd met a Christian. And one guy mentioned to me about the fact that he'd heard all sorts of strange things about Christians. But then he got there and found Palestinians like himself and had similar desires, similar things that they wanted to do. And now one of his best friends is a Christian. And my argument is if we can get more Muslims with that appreciation of Christians, the context within which Bethlehem University, or the context within which Christians are going to live, is going to be much more supportive.
So the university, as we mentioned, has been in Bethlehem since '73. And has witnessed some of the conflicts, the intifadas, the various Israeli security measures. How has that affected the life of the university? And the Holy See has now signed a bilateral agreement recognizing Palestine. Has that had any effect?
Okay, we'll go back to the first thing. Bethlehem University has been closed 12 times by the Israeli military, once for 3 years. And that has obviously had an impact on us. Since 1994, since the Oslo Agreement and the withdrawal of the Israelis from Area A, or particularly from Bethlehem, there has there hasn't been any incursion, but in 2002, during the siege of the Church of the Nativity, Bethlehem University was closed down at that stage. Where for 40 days Bethlehem was under siege from the Israeli military. But in the 8 years I've been there, we've not had any incursion of the military certainly onto the campus. But I'd say the context in which we're operating, particularly with the restriction on movement, it does have a significant impact on our students. But coming back to your second question about the Vatican recognising Palestine, I think one of our biggest challenges is to keep hope alive. And I've made a clear distinction between hope and optimism, because I think that when the Palestinians look back over the last 60 years, there's very little that leads them to be optimistic. So what is it that hope is about? And I think hope, in the way I'm seeing it with students and with faculty and staff, is an awareness that they're not going through the suffering by themselves, that there are people who are standing in solidarity with them. And I think I've had students say that very clearly about our pilgrims who come to Bethlehem University, that these people are from outside are coming, because it's very easy for our students to get the impression that they're the problem, they're the ones that are causing all these hassles, and that nobody wants anything to do with them. And I think for pilgrims to come and be with them is giving the lie to that. It's showing them that people do really care. And I think in a broad sense, the Vatican recognizing Palestine, the Vatican forming this agreement with the Palestinians, is also showing that there are people outside the Palestine who do really believe in these young people. And I think that's one of the things that's giving them hope. In practical terms, I'm not sure it's going to affect the way we operate, but I think in terms of some of the details, for example, the taxation thing, there's an agreement in there about us not being taxed as an institution under the Vatican umbrella. But I think there are also things around allowing us to be a Christian university in a country that is predominantly Muslim. There are things around us being allowed to have gathering, which we are taking for granted at present, but to have it enshrined in some arrangement like that, I think it's really hopeful for us.
Let's take a look now at what the Pope has been doing this week. On Saturday, the Vatican hosted the Jubilee for boys and girls. Now, Pope Francis wasn't actually scheduled to take part on Saturday, but then this happened. Pope Francis walked out of the Vatican gates and into the piazza, where he greeted a few people, put on a stole, and sat down to hear confessions. There were 150 other priests in the square doing the same. The Holy Father stayed over an hour and heard confessions from 16 young people. Needless to say, that is a sacrament that will never be the same for those kids. On Sunday, the Pope celebrated Mass with young people taking part in the Jubilee events. Catholic News Service has highlights and reaction from one U.S. family that happened to be taking part.
We had spring break this week, so we came to the Jubilee. We make our confirmation like 2 weeks when we get home, so it's definitely great to see like the history of the church and other people who are Catholic too, because where we live it's not as big of a following. So coming here, it was definitely interesting to see a lot of other youth who were involved.
Non accontentatevi della mediocrità, di vivacchiare stando comodi e seduti. Non fidatevi di chi vi distrae dalla vera ricchezza, che siete voi, dicendovi che la vita è bella solo se si hanno molte cose. Diffidate di chi vuol farvi credere che valete quanto mascherate da forti, come gli eroi del film, o quando portate abiti all'ultima moda. La vostra felicità non ha prezzo e non si commercia, non è un'app che si scarica sul telefonino, nemmeno la versione più aggiornata potrà aiutarvi a diventare liberi e grandi nell'amore.
The fact that everybody was welcome and up close, and he took time after Mass to greet many people. He welcomed kids up to send out to the mission field. He does that. I think that he inspires the youth.
It was amazing to see him because obviously we'd seen like pictures of him, but to see him like in person and have like a real connection with him was definitely special.
It was far from a quiet Sunday for the Pope. In the afternoon, he surprised 3,000 people who were taking part in an Earth Day event organized by the Focolari movement. He turned up at Rome's Villa Borghese Park, where the event was happening, and took a seat on the stage to participate in the afternoon's activities. Now, the Focolari had created a village in the middle of the park to show off the different ways that people can live together in peace and solidarity, and at the same time be kind to the planet. The Pope listened to people share their experiences of trying to help others, and then he offered his own thoughts on the matter, entirely unscripted. He said the only way to understand the world's problems and feel compassion is to get close to those in need. He said, "It's a risk, but it is also an opportunity for me and for the person I draw near to." On Monday, Pope Francis met with King Wilhelm and Queen Maxima of Holland. There was no statement released about that meeting. Queen Maxima is Catholic, and she's actually from Buenos Aires. Tuesday was a day of rest, but Wednesday was the general audience, and Catholic News Service has details.
Non è automatico che chi frequenta la casa di Dio e conosce la sua misericordia sappia amare il prossimo. Non è automatico. Tu puoi conoscere tutta la Bibbia, tu puoi conoscere tutte le rubriche liturgiche, tu puoi conoscere tutta la teologia, ma del conoscere non è automatico il amare. L'amare ha un'altra strada, l'amore ha un'altra strada, con intelligenza, ma qualcosa di più. Non esiste vero culto se esso non si traduce in servizio al prossimo. Non dimentichiamolo mai, di fronte alla sofferenza di così tanta gente sfinita dalla fame, dalla violenza e dalle ingiustizie, non possiamo rimanere spettatori. Ignorare la sofferenza dell'uomo cosa significa? Significa ignorare Dio. Se io non mi avvicino a quell'uomo, a quella donna, a quel bambino, a quell'anziano, a quell'anziana che soffre, non mi avvicino a Dio.
On Friday, Pope Francis met with people participating in an international conference on regenerative medicines. U.S. Vice President Joe Biden was expected to take part in that conference. And on Saturday, Pope Francis is holding a special Jubilee Year general audience. And let's take a look now at the resignations and nominations that happened this week. The big move announced this week was actually in Cuba. The Pope accepted the resignation of Cardinal Jaime Ortega of Havana. Now, Cardinal Ortega is 80 years old and well past the retirement age, but he was kept on because he has been a key player in rebuilding the relationship between the Church and the Cuban government. Replacing him in Havana is Bishop Juan de la Gracia Garcia Rodriguez. He was the auxiliary bishop of Camagüey until just now. Well, that's all for this edition of Vatican Connections. And join us again next week for more on the Pope's Jubilee Celebrations. Until then, follow us on Twitter, check our blog for regular updates, or watch us on Roku TV on demand. From everyone here, thanks for watching. I'll see you again next time.